Hello, and welcome to the Dissident Mama Podcast, episode 23. Today, I'm delighted and honored to have James Ronald Kennedy on the show. He was born and raised in Mississippi. He received his bachelor's degree from the University of Louisiana, Monroe, and a master's degree in health administration from Tulane University, New Orleans, and a master's of jurisprudence in health law from Loyola University, Chicago. Ron, along with his brother Walter Donald Kennedy, are the Kennedy twins and are best known for their best-selling book, The South Was Right, which has sold more than 180,000 copies, and its new edition for the 21st century was just released by Shotwell Publishing. The Kennedy twins have written 11 other books, including Why Not Freedom? America's Revolt Against Big Government, Punished with Poverty, Dixie Rising, Rules for Rebels, Yankee Empire, Aggressive Abroad and Despotic at Home, and When Rebel Was Cool. Ron and his brother Donnie have been interviewed by numerous local and national talk radio shows such as Colonel Oliver North's radio show, Alan Colmes' radio show, Bill Maher's Politically Incorrect, the BBC, French National TV, Louisiana Public Broadcasting TV, and Mississippi Public Broadcasting Radio and TV. Both have served as commander of the Louisiana Division, Sons of Confederate Veterans, and have received special recognition awards from the National Commander of the Sons of Confederate Veterans, the Jefferson Davis Historical Gold Medal from the United Daughters of the Confederacy, as well as other Southern heritage organizations. Welcome, sir.
Well, thank you. You read that just like I wrote it, so you did a good job. Thank you a lot.
Plagiarism is a good thing.
I will correct you a little bit. By my count, it's 16 books, not 11 books.
Oh, my goodness.
Who's counting?
Well, you should be. I've written 0, so that's amazing.
Well, I don't think writing books by itself is going to be the solution. So probably what you're doing and the people doing podcasts and this kind of things is probably more important in the millennial world we live today.
Well, I've got to tell you that I'm kind of skipping past my first question, which we'll get to, but you and your twin brother have been writing books, articles, making speeches, promoting this whole Southern heritage thing since 1990. I first came along, y'all, in print in the Confederate Veteran magazine that I get because my husband is a member of the Sons of Confederate Veterans. This was probably 04 or 05. Your writings, as well as that's just a phenomenal magazine all around, but it really helped to educate me, to kind of bring me out of my kind of scallywag malaise. I went through I wasn't ardently anti-Southern, but, I was a leftist, a socialist, a feminist, an atheist, all those ists. And your writing helped to bring me from the dark side. So writing is indeed important, and your books are very powerful, and they're not extremely long. So I think they're very accessible to people, because some books are great, but they're, 800 pages, and most people just don't do that. They'll read a little bit of it. So let's get back to you, a little personal thing. You are an identical twin, right?
That's right. I have an extremely handsome and good-looking twin brother. Identical twin brother, by the way.
And I've only seen you all, pictures of you online and seen you at a couple Abbeville conferences, but I think I can already tell you apart, even without the hair differentials. So I've got a knack for that because I have 12-year-old twins myself who are mortal enemies or best friends. There's no in between. So that's going to be an interesting dynamic to find out how you and your brother got involved in this and how you make it work, because I'm sure there's some butting of the heads sometimes, as I can imagine.
Well, it's really interesting being an identical twin and you being a mom of twins. I think you'll understand this. Twins have a special bond, especially identical twins, but also fraternal twins, but especially identical twins, because we're nature's clones,
Mm-hmm.
so we're genetically the same. And my brother and I have had very, very few disagreements. We will have, a certain point of view that we'll both sort of debate each other on and learn from each other and figure out, what's the best solution or what's the best way to present this idea. But as far as being enemies are angry with each other. It just doesn't really happen. And here we are, 73 years old, and I still just about every day we'll talk on the telephone. Now he's up in North Louisiana, about 5.5 hours from me, but we'll talk to each other just about every day. But we're not doing so much family stuff as we are revolution.
Right.
Advertising books, doing interviews, working out this point or that point. But still, it has kept us very busy. And before we started this, we were reenactors, and we spent a lot of time, quote, killing Yankees on the battlefield,
Right.
reenacting, which was really a great time for the whole family, really. But I think twins have a special bond, and we've been able to leverage that into a lot of our writing. Even books that, for instance, Donald wrote recently, Confederate Mythbuster. Well, he wrote that, but he would send it to me and say, "What do you think about this?" And I think I'd do this or I'd change that. And sometimes he'd take my suggestions, sometimes he wouldn't. But we still sort of work together, even when we're doing our own different books.
Now, did you ever have to play the Yankees on the battlefield? I know that I've heard that most reenactors are Southern and they don't like doing that, but somebody has to play the Yanks, right?
Yes, we were with Donald was captain in the 12th Louisiana, and I was a corporal. I liked being non-commissioned. I didn't like to have to go to all the meetings the officers went to, but we were quite often we would have to, what we call galvanize and play the Yankee part, which was really interesting because that way we got to insult the spectators, and make them dislike the Yankees,
Just playing the part, historically accurate, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, let's dive into a little bit of this. We throw around lots of words that everybody thinks they know what they mean. So one thing we throw around a lot is the South. So what is that to you? Is it an ideology? Is it something more, or is it multiple things? And how important is Christianity to its meaning, roots, and future?
Well, I think when I think of the South, I think of family. And Southerners are great believers in the family. It's always been part of our culture. People like Dr. Grady McWhinney really made a big deal about the Scotch-Irish background, which is very clannish, C-L-A-N, very clannish, very group-oriented, very tribe-oriented, and something that I often refer to as Southerners being kith and kin. You and your husband aren't blood related to me, but you are kith to me. And therefore, if someone attacks you, I have an obligation to come help you. So the South is more of a family, and it is very spiritual and not necessarily all religious. Spirituality includes enjoyment of life, leisure, whereas our counterparts are more materialistic. The almighty dollar is their goal in life, whereas our goal is to enjoy life. I love this saying that a Yankee would never eat something that he could sell for a profit, whereas a Southerner would never sell anything he could eat. Which sort of shows the difference in a materialistic Yankee society versus a spiritual Southern society. Now, the religion is very, very important to the South. The South is known as the Bible Belt. There's a reason for that. I mean, look at most recent surveys show that the most church attending states in the United States are the Southern states. Utah, because of its Mormon background, is right in there as well. But all the rest is the South is the Bible Belt. We believe in our Christian heritage, our Christian upbringing. Even those of us, well, I attend regularly, but there's Southerners that don't attend church regularly. Down here in South Louisiana, there's Catholics that don't attend Mass regularly, but they still have that attachment to their faith and their religion. In times of crises, that's where they go for solace, for support, for comfort, for hope. So, yes, religion is very important to the South. And unfortunately, if you'll look at the rest of what I would call the blue states, they are very unchurched. So we have a big schism just on religion alone, just a spiritual versus a materialistic society.
And how would you describe materialism? Because that's another thing, I use that word a lot too, and I think it goes along with rationalism as well. But what does that mean? Just liking stuff?
Well, you know, I think Admiral Raphael Sims of the CSS Alabama, he said it best. He said, the Yankee is compelled to toil to make the world go around. So it's that sense that the most important thing in life is the accumulating wealth. Not almost like, well, Sims says, Raphael Sims said, the Yankee works like the bee or the beaver, just to get more and more, but not for a purpose. Whereas the Southerner, we don't reject the idea of, we don't want to live in squander, we don't want to live in poverty, but you work in order to enjoy. You work in order to provide for those you love, your community and your state. You don't work for the purpose of sheer accumulating more and more wealth. That's the globalist view that we have today. And that's a major problem. And it's a major schism between Southerners and Northerners, really.
It's almost come to define all of America, and unfortunately, a lot of people in the South as well, even native-born people. So I'm sure we'll get to that eventually. But let's go ahead and talk about The South Was Right. It was the first of your 16 books. The newest edition just came out. It was written back in 1991. I was 20 years old and not doing anything of value. Let's just put it that way. So, this first book proudly proclaimed that the South had a legal and a moral right to self-determination in 1861, and a right that remains today. So here you are, you're this, professionally successful guy. Your brother's leads a successful life. Why on earth did you write this book? What motivated y'all to write it and to do something that was really one of the first books to come out unapologetically? It wasn't just history. It was really digging into not just what had happened, but the ramifications for it today and how to move forward with it. So why on earth did you write this book?
Well, I go back to family. A Southerner understands the fact that we get our history from our family. And it was with me, and I make that point too in When Rebel Was Cool, that we get our history from our family, whereas Northerners and scallywag Southerners get their history from books written by Northerners to glorify Northern heroes and Northern ideas. And that requires them to stigmatize and slander their opponents. Well, who's their opponents? The spiritual South. So, so I would go to our community cemetery where I was raised in Mississippi. Of course, being a Southern Baptist, you always attended the funerals of people in the community. And at the grave site, I'd see off on the distance this strange looking grave marker, and it had CSA on it. And that was my father's grandfather. So when these Yankees start insulting and slandering the South, it's not some mythical thing it's personal, it's family. And so Donald and I decided, the heck with it. No one else is writing anything, and we're too stupid to know that you can't do it. So we wrote the book, and was shocked that this self-published book, the 91 edition, sold 5,000 copies before we could turn around.
Wow.
So that's when we went to Pelican Publishing and said, we want to upgrade this and put footnotes in it and pictures and really do a good, and it took off. It became a classic. And I think the third edition is going to do even better.
Yeah. I mean, it's quite the tome. And again, powerful and innovative in what you're saying. I mean, it's both like ancient ideas and new ideas, but it's succinct too, and that's really hard to pull off. I'm gonna have to have just a conversation with you, Tom. I'll buy you a cup of coffee. Just how do you write these short-ish books? That's a whole nother conversation, but your works are so powerful. So you write this book, it's popular from the get-go, it's become this classic. Take us back to 91. And what was the reaction of the mainstream folks? Was it just like, oh, these are some crazy, Southern weirdos, we don't care what they say? So I want to know the mainstream reaction, but also what was the reaction of the Southern heritage leadership?
Well, the leftist people, they just sort of ignored it and laughed like it was a joke,
right.
Right about what, slavery, that's their get-go, that's what but the mainstream, most of the average Southerners, when we told them about the book and they looked at it and they said, oh, we've always felt like that, and that was the encouraging thing, because they didn't say, oh, y'all are crazy. And they said, no, I've always felt like that, but I didn't know how to say it,
Right.
So that was to us, that was a truly encouraging thing. The discouraging thing wasn't the antagonism from the left. I mean, you expect that. My mama used to say, if the devil is mad at you, you must be doing something right. So the devil on the left was angry that we would even dare suggest that the South was right. And so they tried all type of slanderous things to shut us down. But I didn't mind that. I expected that. And I was very gratified at the average Southerner that I would talk to and show them the book, and they'd read it and oh man, yes, that's great. I love that. You're right. It was the leadership of the Southern Heritage Movement. And I won't call any names or any organizations, but it was the people that you would have thought would say, yes, you're right. They immediately accused Donnie and I of being extremists, radicals, crazy, secret Klansmen, you name it. And the primary thing was that we were upsetting their little apple carts. They had a good little thing. They could have their tea parties and they could feel, we are socially in with the rest of the world, the hoi polloi of society, and you people, you twins, y'all were causing us embarrassment. Go away, leave us alone. Right. You bother me. Well, we didn't go away, and we didn't leave them alone. One of my favorite pictures I have is me standing next to, I just got through doing a speaking engagement at one of these Southern Heritage Movement. I won't call the name. You would recognize it if I did, but the lady that was in charge of the overall national organization was there, so I pointed a picture with her. If she had been standing next to Jack the Ripper, she could have had a more sour look on her face. She was not happy that she was standing there next to one of the Kennedy twins. But that's the type of resistance that we got. Now, it's not like that now for several different reasons. For one thing, a lot of these organizations, those old people have moved on. They've graduated to eternity. Newer blood, I can tell you this, when these sons of Confederate veterans were in the middle of this, the old guard wanting to get rid of the Kennedys, they had a GEC meeting, and they had forgot that my twin brother was sitting on the GEC then, the General Executive Council, and they were talking among themselves about, we got to do something. We're getting a lot of new members. Well, you'd think they'd be excited about that. New members coming into an organization, but they weren't, because these new members were coming in because they were reading the South was right. We can't have that. And then they looked over and they saw my twin brother, and they had egg on their face.
Wow.
But that old crowd is not with us any longer. and we're still here.
Yeah.
So
And do you
you can
see?
see there was they didn't put us up on their shoulders and carry us around the organization. Yeah, you're telling the truth at last, and you're offering a solution to all this. It was
Right.
quite the opposite.
And, at least they could have just not thrown you under the bus, okay, maybe you don't have to parade us around, but throwing us under the bus, that's a whole different thing. So what do you think has changed? Is it just because times have gotten crazier? People, there are so many miseducated people, but the people who understand Southern history know it well. I mean, they know it very, very well. And these are just average folks. We're not historians or anything, but we're constantly learning and diving into this stuff. Is it that just people have more access to books like yours and, podcasts that are, teaching them real history? Or is it the times that are changing them, that they're seeing that the battles we face today are the same old battles as yesterday?
Yeah, I think that everything you said is true. First of all, when a book sells over 100,000 copies and is primarily in the South, although at one time the South was right, the bookstore that sold the most copies was in Manhattan. So, I mean, yeah, go figure, but nonetheless, most of these books are sold in the South. And so people were starting to say, well, we got to be careful with people in the organization, the hierarchy. We got to be careful about attacking this concepts and what the Kennedys are saying. We'll be more subtle about it. Well, when they did that, people started coming into these organizations that had these attitudes. And when The South Was Right came out, it was just about the only book out there that was saying positive things, not just positive things about the South, but that the South was right in 1861 because the colonial Americans were right in 1776. They had a right to self-determination, and so do we. And that right continues even today. Now, that marked The South Was Right off as a book different than any other book about the South. But in addition to that, you had a number of new books coming out. You had organizations like Abbeville forming. You had scholars like Clyde Wilson, who were well known, they are the intelligentsia. They write from a scholarly mind. Donald and I write with passion. There's a difference there. Scholarly, no. Passionate for the cause, yes.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk about one of your many passionate books, When Rebel Was Cool, Growing Up in Dixie, 1950 to 1965. It was just published this summer, correct?
Right.
Okay. Well, I remember that era, even though I was not born until 1971. So I think it depends. I mean, you're going to have a different, where you grew up, and, things can maybe last for different periods of time and, sustain themselves in different ways. But I mean, I grew up, I went to a high school. We were the Rebels, Douglas Southall Freeman High School. Our yearbook was called The Historian. We were, we flew the battle flag. All of our team uniforms were gray, all that kind of thing. And it wasn't just a thing. The history that I got, even in the Richmond public schools, was pretty good. We would talk about, of course, slavery and things like that, but it was always the war was over secession. The war was over states' rights. Whether you could, self-determinedly leave a voluntary union or not. So it wasn't secession as a bad thing. It was like, oh, it was just a states' rights thing. I mean, even the teachers we had that probably came from not just the South, because a lot of times public schools have northern teachers, no matter where the geographic location is. But I was just going to say, I think it can go even past a point. And then, of course, the 1970s with, Southern rock bands and, Dukes of Hazzard in the 80s and all this kind of stuff. I'm lucky that I grew up in that, and I'm trying to give my kids some of that coolness, and they totally think the South is cool. But what happened? What was it? I'm assuming, I have not read the book, but that you chose 1965 for a specific reason. What happened? And we'll dive into some other questions after that.
Okay, well, first of all, I wrote this book, and I'm going to hold it up. I don't know if it'll show up very well, but you see the, let me get it over here.
There you go.
You see the cover with the lady or the majorette with the Confederate flag, and there's a background, there's a football field, well, just like your school that you went to. That was part of the South then. Well, I took the 15 years that Donald and I started really remembering. That was like in 1950. You know, we were born in 47, so we're around 4 years old. We could start remembering. And we left home to go to school, college and professional school in 1965. So that was the era that we grew up in. And during that time was when the South, and really the whole nation, was celebrating the centennial of the War for Southern Independence. So I wanted to write a book so that my grandchildren, your children, your grandchildren could have a reason to understand, why did we think rebel was cool? Why did we, as opposed to today, you're a white supremacist, you're a neo-Nazi, you're, just all kind of horrible things are slandered against you if you show the Confederate flag. Well, I wanted to show, look, there was a time when even the United States federal government thought rebel was cool. And I got the pictures of the coin that minted by the United States Mint 50-cent piece with the pictures of Jefferson Davis and Lee and Stonewall Jackson there in Georgia. All that was the United States Mint wasn't trying to promote white supremacy when it issued that coin. There's a number of stamps that the U.S. Post Office issued in that era, starting in the 1920, when they were celebrating the last of the Confederate veteran reunion, the United Confederate Veterans Reunion, all the way down to 1970 was the last stamp issued by the Postal Office honoring Confederate veterans in the South. They didn't do that because they were wanting to encourage white supremacy or racism. They did it because it was part of, at that time, American history, American heritage. You take, in World War II, we had the Lee tank, we had the Stuart tank. In the Cold War, the U.S. Navy had two submarines, one named for Stonewall Jackson, the other one named for Robert E. Lee. I find it amusing that you got Army guys named for submarines, but nonetheless, Confederates. President Eisenhower kept a picture of Robert E. Lee in his office when he was president in his military uniform. And he wrote a letter saying, I'm proud to have that man's picture. So there was a time when rebel was cool. And that time represented a time when there was this sort of a gentleman's agreement between the North and the South, a time when post-war, the Southerners said, okay, we'll accept the outcome of the war, not because we like it, but because there's no other choice. There was a choice. They could have done like the Irish did, continue the guerrilla campaign year after year, generation after. I mean, it took the Irish, depending on how you count, up to 700 years to get rid of the English out of Ireland. The South could have gone that route, and there was fear that it would. But we said, nope. If you'll leave us alone, give us nominal control of our states, and remember, these state governments were puppet governments, bayonet governments. We'll accept this new federal government, which is different from the one the founding fathers created, but we'll accept that, and we'll provide blood, Southern blood, in every war, and which we did. So we kept our end of the bargain, and for a while, the North kept its side part of the bargain. But somewhere around, I'd say around the turn of 2000, it was obvious that it was over. It was gone. That bargain was broken. But I wanted to write this book so my grandchildren and all the grandchildren of the South could understand why the Kennedy twins are so passionate about the South. And so the book is really more of a story of Donald and I growing up at that time period, and the various things that happened to us transpired in the South. And we point out that the rural South was impoverished. I mean, we were very poor, but we didn't, we didn't carry a chip on our shoulders about it. We picked up our struggles, and we carried our load, and we did the best we could. And we were a very spiritual people. So we looked to God to comfort and to guide us and to help us. And it was a different world. There was no drive-by shootings in that era. The Black families were mainly two, mother, father, and the children raised in one family, in a normal family. We've lost all that. We've lost all that. So all of society is suffering as a result of it. I wanted to show, when Rebel was cool, I wanted to show why the South, we thought it was cool, and hey, it still can be. And that's a long answer to a short question.
Well, and the castigation that happens now, it's not just the white supremacist thing, but the stupidity of the backwards rubes of the South. And I wrote a blog a couple years ago called Yankee Sanctification, and it actually quoted some stuff that Dr. Don Livingston wrote about. This was before the War of Northern Aggression. Of course, we know Southern presidents, 5 of which served 2 terms, were elected 48 out of the first 60 years of our country. Southerners were 17 of the first 28 Supreme Court justices, 21 of 33 House speakers, and 14 of 19 attorneys general. Charleston, South Carolina, let me skip that part. Almost 3 times as many Southerners attended college as did their Northern counterparts. Georgia Wesleyan College was the first in the world charter to give women advanced degrees. The South Carolina College Library in 1840 housed more books than did Harvard. And here's one other thing. Most of the people who went to Princeton, their student body in 1850, most of them, so over 50% at least, were Southerners. So it's
Right.
not just the whole, oh, you're racist and horrible and all this kind of stuff, but that you're so stupid and you have to be educated and re-educated. When did that happen? Because, I remember the Beverly Hillbillies and stuff like that, but even the movies I saw growing up that were cool Southerners, I guess maybe there was a stereotypical stupid guy in there from the South, but it was usually really smart, savvy Southerners. When do you think that started happening, of just the Southerner is just the dumbest thing ever? When did that occur?
Well, that's a good question, because the postmodernists moved into the universities in the 60s, the early 60s, and they managed to infiltrate all the universities. Now they control all the Southern universities as well. But, that started happening in the 60s. And I think part of the reason was because the left was starting to feel its oats. They were starting to feel like, we've got a chance here. And the main enemy are these people that believe in limited government, states' rights, the Constitution. We've got to make them look like idiots. We've got to make them look stupid. We've got to make people who would otherwise agree with them in say, the Plains states, other parts of the country, those red counties you see out, and red states you see outside the South, make them, I don't want to associate with those people. Plus, you always need, when you're a propagandist, and that's what the liberals are. They're great propagandists. You have to have someone to point to as the enemy. Goebbels pointed towards the Jewish people. That's the enemy. So you mobilize the masses against the enemy. Well, Donald and I make this point in several of our more recent books, that the United States of America today is controlled by an evil neo-Marxist shadow government. And that shadow government has its ministry of propaganda, which is primarily the media and Hollywood, the entertainment group. They have done a great job in making the South the target, the conservative South. Now, if you want to sell out the South and be a sycophant for the Yankee Empire, well, they'll let you into their club, but otherwise, not so. But I think that started happening in the 60s, and it really progressed more as more postmodernists took over academia. Because remember, all of our news media, they're trained by postmodern academics now. So they come out thinking everything's to the left of center, and anything to the right is evil and wrong and stupid and ignorant.
Yeah, and maybe it's because more people started going to college that became the modern high school diploma was, at least getting a bachelor's degree. And when you're immersed in that, because that's really when I'm just the, total cliche, went away to college and just I was a sponge for all this stuff because I thought, oh, I'm seeing truth for the first time. And, I bought into a lot of that stuff because, it was just not only that they were a main enemy, like you said, but that the South represented everything that was holding people back from progress or equality or, just forward thinkingness. So it's a powerful thing. But I mean, I think some people are waking up to it definitely more than used to be. And your books definitely are helping with that. And one of your most interesting books is Yankee Empire. So Yankee Empire, Aggressive Abroad and Despotic at Home. So this is about that evil shadow government you were talking about. This is about that whole globalism thing you were talking about. So the cover, may have upset a few patriotic Americans. So tell us about that book. And what you would define as this Yankee Empire.
Yeah, let me hold another book up, and you could see Uncle Sam there grabbing the world, and that upset a lot of people who consider themselves Tea Party patriots, good old 100% Americans. Well, the point we wanted to make in this book, now, first of all, the title, the second part, Aggressive Abroad and Despotic at Home, that is a direct quote from General Robert E. Lee in a letter to Lord Acton after the war, in which basically he said that if those people, meaning the Yankees, if they use their victory in the war to consolidate all power in the federal government in Washington, D.C. and destroy states' rights, then the United States will become, as all other empires, aggressive abroad, despotic at home. So we wanted to show that, yes, General Lee was right. I mean, 2020 should prove to everyone it's certainly despotic at home. I mean, if you need more evidence than what you have before you now, you're helpless. It's impossible. You're brain dead. You've got a flat line. You just might as well go on to the morgue because the evidence is there that despotic at home. But what about aggressive abroad? American patriots, the people that fly their flag, they think, oh, America is a good nation. We go around the world trying to promote freedom and democracy. That's what the propagandists want you to believe. We look first of all, the Confederate States of America was a sovereign, democratically elected nation. Okay, end of statement. We had a right to be free. We reserved that right when we went into the Union. We reserved the right to withdraw from the Union. We had the same rights that the colonies had in 1776. We established a nation. It wasn't a group of rioters out doing. No, this was a political effort voted on by the people using the same franchise system that was used in the North. So it can't be, well, you didn't let the slaves vote. Well, neither did the North let their slaves vote. They had slaves. Neither did the colonies allow their slaves to vote when they seceded in 1776. And all 13 colonies were slave-holding colonies. The New England states were actually engaged in the slave trade. So if secession against the British Empire was okay for the 13 colonies. It was certainly okay for the South. So the South seceded, set up its own nation. The North, Lincoln was asked 3 different times, why not let the South go? He plainly said, where we going to get our revenues? And there is the reason. The Northern, the sycophants, the apologists for Northern invasion said, when we had to free the slaves, that was not their intention. They wanted to make sure they could keep the tariff revenues flowing into their coffers. The South, by 1840, we were providing close to 75% of the revenue to finance the federal government, and most of the quote internal improvements was going to the North.
Right.
So the South was I think one guy said we had become the milch cow of the Union. What we would say today, the South had become the ATM of the North. So they could get all of our money anytime they wanted it. So the South left, but the North, being an imperialist nature, being more concerned about wealth than anything else, they initiated an invasion, a conquest, and an occupation of a sovereign nation. So the Confederate States of America was the first nation that the Yankee Empire invaded and occupied. And the technique it used to set up puppet governments in the South was used when it went over and took over Hawaii. Hawaii was an independent sovereign nation. The United States had diplomatic relations with it, but we invaded. I say we, the Yankee Empire invaded, took over Hawaii, and then through a system of repopulation, flooded the island. The native people now make up probably 9% of the total population. Well, they've repopulated the area. Well, they did the same thing to the South too, if you don't believe it. Look at Maryland. It's been repopulated with federal bureaucrats living there who naturally they'll never vote to lower government expenditures because that's their paycheck. So repopulation was a big thing that they did to control the territory they wanted to keep. They then went after Cuba. They went after the Philippines, on and on. Most Americans don't realize that the Shah of Iran was put in. They deposed, the United States CIA deposed the democratically elected prime minister of Iran, who he was more like Huey Long was in Louisiana. Huey Long wanted to make the big Standard Oil Company pay more tax revenues to the people of Louisiana. Well, the prime minister of, duly elected prime minister of Iran wanted to do that. The British, who owned BP, British Petroleum, who owned the oil rights, they were afraid. They wanted to get rid of this guy. They were so beat up after the war, they couldn't do it. So they convinced the CIA to do the plot to overthrow and install the Shah. And as a reward, several large American oil companies just happened to get some great deals out of it. Isn't that strange how things like that work out? So over and over, all over the world, we see how the Yankee Empire has done that to other people, installed puppet governments, just like they did in the South, and use that for their own benefit. And that's what we're showing in Yankee Empire. Aggressive abroad and despotic at home. And it has upset a lot of, quote, patriotic Americans.
Yeah, and the economic aspect of the War of Northern Aggression is so interesting that a lot of people don't think about it. You know, they just, when they think about the slavery thing, they're not looking at what that meant economically and taking over an entire region of the United States that was very profitable and productive. I think even free farms in the South were like 10% more profitable and productive than northern farms. So, I mean, that's just like this small anecdote, but you know, the South was a prosperous place and they definitely wanted it all and didn't want to share it. So let's talk about some of this despotism at home with another book of yours I want to talk about, Punished with Poverty, The Suffering South, Prosperity to Poverty in the Continuing Struggle. The newest edition came out this summer, right? A couple months ago?
It came out about 6 or 7 months ago. Yes, we've been real busy writing
It's
books and doing second edition of
craziness.
current book. But
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
because so much of the politics has changed. I mean,
yeah,
we're in a cauldron right now. We've had to rewrite some things to address current issues.
yeah. And if I'm not, if I'm correct, the newest edition has more pictures and maps and things like that. Yeah, it's a really beautiful book. So, Clyde Wilson, the great historian that we know and love, says if enough Southerners would read and take to heart "Punished with Poverty," it would bring about a revolution in American politics. And then Brian McClanahan, another wonderful historian, says Southerners considered Reconstruction a greater calamity than the Civil War itself. Tell us
Mhm.
a little bit about this because, again, modern people just kind of think, oh, there's always just been poor people in the South, and just it just is the way it is, and Reconstruction wasn't that bad. Okay, give us a little primer. I know you can't go into the home book, but your elevator pitch for this book and why it is so important.
Well, first of all, the reason I think is the most important. My brother and I have an argument about this. He says the most important because
Good argument.
we were very, very wealthy, and then we were intentionally now impoverished by the Yankee Empire. And I said, yeah, that's true. But I think the most important thing is the fact that it proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that the war did not end slavery. It ended chattel slavery, but the slavery increased. We had 4.5 million chattel slaves in the South prior to the war. After the war, up until really close to 1965, a system of sharecropping was in place. And that system of sharecropping was worse than slavery in many, many, many ways. For instance, I'll give you an example that we quote in the book. The help of Black sharecroppers was 20% less than it was under slavery. And the whites were just as bad. Remember, not every white Southerner was a plantation owner. Most of us were what's known as plain folk of the old South. We had a very nice living. We lived out in the hills and we had cattle running on open range. Very wealthy when you look at from that point. As a matter of fact, the cattle in the South prior to the war in 1860 census, the cattle, that'd be hogs and cattle, little sheep, not much. We're not big into mutton, but pork and beef we are. The cattle in the South on our open range was more valuable than the cotton, sugar cane, rice, and I believe it was one other product combined. So the plantation was important, but we had as much wealth up in the hills running on the open range, and we had a very leisurely lifestyle. Well, when the war came, all of that was wiped out, not just the plantation. All of the open range farming was destroyed. Number one, most of the cattle was killed and destroyed. In Louisiana, we lost, it wasn't until about 1945, 46 that we got to the same amount of cattle in the state as we had before the war. So all that was gone. So what was left for these poor white folks? Sharecropping, which is peonage, debt peonage. It's like a peasantry. And it's worse than being owned by a landowner who has to take care of you by law, because a sharecropper can be kicked out at the end of the season. No one, he's on his own. Now, in addition to that, massive malnutrition was endemic across the South from Reconstruction on up until really close to 1950. One of the diseases that was prevalent in the South during that time was something called pellagra. Most physicians today don't know what pellagra is. I've got a picture in the book of a man, and it's a horrible looking it's due to malnutrition. The South could not feed itself after the war, or couldn't feed all of its population after the war. Now, when I when I say I'm passionate about this, it's because doing this research, my brother and I ran across this letter from a doctor in Hazelhurst, Mississippi, which is in the county where we were born and raised and where our family was from. And he was treating this lady in 1947, the year we were born, for pellagra. So it wasn't something that's, oh, that was way back then. Now, that lady was my grandfather's brother's, his twin brother's wife. She was my great aunt. So it is personal.
Yeah.
It's personal. It's not just history. And when people slander the South, they're slandering my family. Mm-hmm. When they slander your family, they're slandering me, because we're kith and kin. And we're in this together. And by God, we're going to win together. So anyway, that's just an idea of what happened to the South. We were at one time, we were, matter of fact, per capita, the South, and that includes the slaves, counting the slaves per capita, we were richer than the per capita income in Great Britain. This was during colonial era. What colony in the history of the world was richer than the motherland? but the South was. New England wasn't, but the South was. And there was a great jealousy. And that's why Patrick Henry said, look, during the Constitutional Convention, he said, look, the South, we don't need to go into this union with these people. This proposed Constitution, it sounds great, but I'm not worried about what the word said. I'm worried about the character of the people we're associating with. They outnumber us, and they'll use this government to despoil our property and use it to their benefit and our detriment. Well, we didn't listen to Patrick Henry, and Patrick Henry wasn't the only one that said that. Many other Southerners said that, and a few Northerners did too. But as a result, by 1840, the South had become the milch cow of the Union.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one of the things I really like about all your writing, but particularly this book, is it takes the moral high ground. And I think that's one of the mistakes that people on the right, conservatives, non-leftists, GOP people, whatever you want to call them, they always see the moral high ground to the left. Okay, the war is about slavery, so we have to start there and then dig ourselves out of that. I mean, it was about theft, right? Thieving, murdering, invading, and just to think of some of the successes of all of America. You were mentioning, the wealth, but the literacy rate. I think the literacy rate of America was the highest in the world, and of course that included the Southerners as well. We already know from some of those other stats, they were highly educated. And this is not just people going to Princeton. This is people knew how to read and write. And to take that away from people, and now like illiteracy reigns in many places in America, but especially in the South. And for people to think that has always just been a thing, I mean, that's the immoral thing, Absolutely. And when I come at it, my highest ranking Confederate ancestor is A.P. Hill. I say, he didn't die at the siege of Petersburg. He was murdered by federal troops. I mean, that's serious business, right? So that's a way to pull the wool out, from under them, and just really, we should have the moral high ground, honestly. So your books are so powerful in that way. And that leads me to your next book I want to discuss, Dixie Rising, Rule for Rebels. And I particularly like this book because it's not just laying out the moral high ground. It's not just talking about good history and really laying it out in a very succinct, palatable way, but it gives people advice, right? How are we supposed to deal with this crap we've been handed, for lack of a better way to put it? So tell us what your two main things are with Rules for Rebels. It has to do, well, you tell us. I know what it is because I've read this book, but tell us what the two main takeaways from that book are.
First of all, that book also is at the publisher waiting to be the second edition.
Oh, nice.
I didn't feel like it was strong enough, so I went back.
It's pretty good, but
tighten it up a little bit. The real reason, because of 2020 and the election of America, apparent election. unfortunately, I think it's going to be the apparent election of America's first mail order president. But I wanted to really change it a little bit and give it a little more clarity, because America today is ruled by an evil neo-Marxist shadow government. And I go over that over and over again in several of my books, but I really wanted to clear it up in the second edition of Dixie Rising, because this evil shadow government is the one that sets the tone and tenor for the leftist politicians. And it's got this terrific propaganda ministry. I mean, if Herr Goebbels had this, we'd all be eating sauerkraut. I mean, this is a terrific, I mean, Mama used to say, you got to give the devil his dues. You know, when he does something right, even though it's evil, you got to say, well, he sure knew how to do that. Well, the propagandists of the neo-Marxists, they know how to influence American public sentiment and minds and thoughts, and it filters all the way down. So I wanted to say, look, it's time that we set up our own provisional governments across the South. I called it a shadow government in the first edition, but because I'm talking about the evil neo-Marxist shadow government, I wanted to change it. So, well, let's call it a provisional government, because then you won't be confused between the two. But we want to set up a provisional government in every southern state. And the reason we want to do that is going to serve as a lobbying effort in the state legislature. It's going to become a national lobbying effort. You know, the Tea Party was a gigantic failure. You know, they had some great meetings, you know, rah, rah, rah. But what did they accomplish? You know, nothing.
We got Nikki Haley out of it. I know. Huge failure.
You know, it's true that the Tea Party, you know, and the reason that, and I'm not, because I attended, I spoke, I have friends who were Tea Party members, but there was no strategic plan.
Yes.
And that was the problem. There was no ultimate solution. How do we solve the problem that we have? So I said, look, what we got to do is set up what my brother calls Tea Party with teeth, you know, something that's strong, a Tea Party that can really accomplish something. And that's what these provisional governments will do. We've got a strategic plan. We lay it out in the book, and we have a means by which we can accomplish that. One of the main means is that we need somebody, our spokesman, in the bully pulpit. And I don't know if you remember reading about the bully pulpit. Well, why is that so important? Well, we need one of our own, not a politician. You know, politicians have got us into this mess. Politicians won't get us out. We need one of our own in a statewide elected office to serve as a spokesman for the cause that we're promoting. And the cause is simply this: at a national level, we want Congress to submit to the states a constitutional amendment acknowledging, not granting, but acknowledging the state's right of nullification and secession. That's the national level. At the local level, we're going to work, and of course, as a lobbyist, that means we got to have provisional government chapters in every county and every state. But we've got to be able to convince our wonderful elected officials that have done absolutely nothing in the last 150 years to solve this problem. We've got to convince them that, yes, there's a solution, and you've got to start a ballot initiative in your state, this state, giving the people a chance to vote for this constitutional amendment. We demand that Congress give us this constitutional amendment. And the constitutional amendment's in the book, the second edition. And of course, I published it way back in 1995 for the first time. But nonetheless, that's our national goal. At the local level, at the state level, say here in Louisiana, I want a law passed in the state legislature that defines racism. And it defines racism as wanting to use racial characteristics to deny people equal protection of the law. Anything more than that is slander and will be treated as a hate crime. Now, one of the favorite tools they have, and boy, you and I both, I'm sure, have been victimized by it, is, oh, you're just a racist. Well, if you call me a racist and I don't fit that state definition, statutory definition, then you're liable for slander, and in addition to slander, it's going to be hyped up to being a hate crime. Now, I'm not a proponent of hate crime legislation, but by God, I'll use it if I have to. Mm-hmm. So, all right, and in addition to that, when the time comes for the education department wanting more money for their universities, our lobbyists and our people in every county is going to be contacting their state representatives saying, look, don't give them another penny until they add this rider that any conservative, that the university will allow and provide conservative speakers and grant academic credit for attending, and attach stiff penalties to anyone that attempts or allows the disruption of that speaker. You know, freedom of expression is going to again be possible on that campuses in taxpayer-funded universities. I mean, these are just some of the things. We also need to have some very diligent, tough voting requirements for the franchise and policing of those roles. We can do that, but you can't expect the Republican Party to do it for you. We've got to force them. One of the things I make in the second edition of Dixie Rising is that we, the people in red states and red counties, we are a stateless people. We have no government to protect our interests. One of the best examples is what the Republican legislature and the Republican governor did in Mississippi. Those people had a plebiscite. They voted to keep their flag, and the Republican legislature and the Republican governor got together and had a rump session and they nullified the will of the people. The people are stateless. They have no government. To me, this is the most, and it can go on. Take, for instance, California, where in California in 2008, those people voted to not allow, well, they voted the marriage between one man and one woman, not two men and six goats or anything else. You know, it was one man and one woman. That's the definition of marriage. And it passed as a plebiscite. The federal government nullified the will of the people. So people in red counties and red states, American values people, we are stateless. We have no state to defend us. Now, what does that mean in reality? Well, look at what happened to the Armenians under Turkish rule when they didn't have anyone to protect them. Genocide, that's what happened. Look at the Scots when the English took over Scotland. Genocide, cultural genocide. You couldn't fly a Confederate flag. You couldn't fly an Irish flag, a Scottish flag. You couldn't wear kilts. Bagpipes and tunes and cultural events were destroyed and denied and prohibited. That's what happens when you are a stateless people. And that's where we are today. And that's why we must do something. That's why the bully pulpit, the Tea Party with teeth, as my brother likes to say. I don't know if I like that, but it's a good definition. The provisional government to bring political pressure to bear so we can then have our constitutional amendment submitted. Now, people say, well, what if the blue states won't ratify it? Because it takes something like 38 states to ratify it. Well, that's fine. That's good. But doing this effort, we have convinced the majority of our people that we have the right to self-determination. We have the right to local self-government. So we're going to hang the liberal establishment on the horns of a dilemma. You either pass our constitutional amendment acknowledging states' rights of nullification and secession, or you face a secession movement in all the red states and red counties across America. Now we're talking a revolution, but it's a conservative revolution. It's not a bomb-throwing, rioting, killing revolution. It's a conservative revolution. We're going to conserve the rights that are due to us under the original Constitution. Either reestablish that republic of sovereign states with real states' rights, or else we leave. Simple as that.
Does this provisional government lobbying effort with chapters, does it have a name yet? Is it rolling?
Nope. Nope. It's all up here right now. We're trying to get it together. But listen.
I'll be your PR lady. I'll help.
Great.
I'm good at bringing people together.
and we need to, but this bully pulpit is key to it. Remember Ross Perot's effort it's his little third party?
I do. That was my first presidential election.
Yeah. All right. Well, Ross Perot was a very, God love him, he wasn't a pretty guy at all. That gives all of us not people some hope, but he was charismatic enough to bring people together and a movement. He put together a movement, but the movement died when he lost interest. You're too old to remember George Wallace, but he was like that. And once he started running for president, he shed that white supremacy, but the left wouldn't accept it, but he did. As a matter of fact, his last run for governor, in Alabama, the NAACP endorsed him. So, but nonetheless, he was a great organizer. But Southerners will follow a political leader. They won't follow somebody writes books, even a best-selling author. That's not. They won't follow a blogger like yourself, a podcaster like yourself. They'll listen to us, and we have credibility, but we're not the ones to lead. What we need is an elected position.
Yeah.
And in the book, I point out that you don't need a governor. Number one, it's too expensive. Number two, you're the chief executive officer of the largest corporation in the state. You don't have time to conduct revolution. My suggestion is something like the lieutenant governor in the state of Louisiana, where he didn't even sit in the legislature. He got one little committee he's over, and that's it. Well, that person would have a lot of time to spend going to states all over the South, to counties, to organize a meeting, and he would bring credibility to the cause. And that's what we need. We need to find someone that's acceptable to us, who's not a politician, because a politician is going to be looking to climb that ladder to get to Washington, D.C. That's the hog trough. That's the place where all the good slop is. That's where they all want to go to. And we need someone like ourselves who believe in the cause and that will follow after that cause regardless. And if we can elect somebody to a bully pulpit, say in the lieutenant governor of Louisiana or wherever, we could really start a revolution. And you could do it with 500 people.
Yeah.
You know how? You need 500 people. I say, yeah, I'll put up $500. With that amount of money, you've got a credible start to a political campaign. If you're organized in the state, you have provisional government in all of your parishes. In Louisiana, it would be a parish. In your state, it would be a county. If you've got that organized all over, you've got a nest egg of $250,000 to start with. You could double or triple that. You could win, especially if you've got a message where this is not a business as usual campaign. This is a movement to either destroy the neo-Marxist shadow government that's ruling America, or else we'll create a nation of our own where we will be free.
Yeah. And I mean, that is the most powerful thing that can be done. And I do think the state level, obviously, but even local level, like I was listening to an interview with the guy who runs the Young Americans for Liberty, and they had various people and campaigns all around the country. I think they had 200 people running, typically as either Republican, a few as Libertarians, but they won, I think, like 135 out of the 200 people they had going with very little money, because a lot of times these people maybe are unopposed, or there's just not a lot of money pouring into it, or if they get through the primary and get on the Republican ticket, everybody's just voting straight party by the time you get to a general election. And they're doing it for the exact reasons you were talking about. So these people will have a platform to, be quoted in the newspaper, to be taken seriously. Exactly. And I think it's a really pragmatic way to do it. And then on top of that, I don't think these local and state politicians know how much power they have. For example, Dr. Livingston, again, he just recently spoke to Tennessee legislators who basically brought him in and a few other people. I think Michael Bolden of the 10th Amendment Center may have been there too. I'm not sure for positive, but they basically said, please come in and tell us about all the stuff we can do to keep the federal government at bay. These are like elected politicians at the state level in Tennessee. You know, they don't even realize the power of something like nullification or anything else they can do to keep the Leviathan at bay. And that's powerful, you know, because there is not only the power there, but if you can get people into those positions, you know, it can chip away definitely at that shadow government that you speak of. Can you, I just mentioned nullification.
We've got to
Go
make
ahead.
sure,
Go
I
ahead.
was going to say, we got to make sure that we are in the leadership position of that, because what happens too often is that you'll get a good movement going, like with the Ross Perot and the people that they're no longer interested, or George Wallace, and they get shot, and it's just a one person, you know, movement. That you can't. It's got to be a strategic plan, well known to people all across the South and every red county in America. I even talk in the second edition about red county secession. Why shouldn't parts of California that don't want to be ruled by the neo-Marxists in San Francisco, why shouldn't they form their own state? Well, you know, what about county nullification? You know, there's a shame. Virginia, now blue state, their neo-Marxist legislature tried to pass anti-gun rights laws. Well, hey, why don't we just have county nullification of everything that they, you know, the point is we have the right to local self-government.
Yeah. And I think that's another good way to look at it. You know, you may have constitutional people going, oh, well, you know, the counties were created by the states or whatever. But, you know, I like how you were using the whole define racism at the state level and then use hate crime legislation against them. I mean, there are just some things that we're going to have to like get over to move the ball down the court, you know. And you talk about that in Dixie Rising, using leftism against leftists. And, you know, principle is important, but I mean, this is a deadly game. And I think that is a fine thing to do if that's what promotes a greater self-government and less totalitarianism. Well, nullification is something you talk about in Dixie Rising, and I think some people either haven't heard of it or think they know what it is. Can you tell us what it means to you?
Well, first of all, the best example recently is when the leftists decided to declare sanctuary cities. What they did was they nullified federal laws on immigration. Now, if one of our southern cities tried to nullify the law on partial birth abortion, you know, they'd send the marshals in on it. So that's because they have a government to protect them, the left. We are a stateless people. So we got to keep that in mind.
Yes.
Just because they got away with it don't mean we'll get away with it. That's why our important thing is to hang them on that horns of a dilemma. Either you give us back these rights, acknowledge those rights, or else we'll form a secession movement. And it'll be a movement that'll be acknowledged worldwide. It's going to be real embarrassing for you to explain to the world why half of your country doesn't want to associate with you. We can hang them on the horns of a dilemma. But anyway, back to the question of nullification. The best, and I love this, you know, the best example of nullification when it was actually a legitimate, and after Lincoln, forget it. There's no such thing as nullification, secession. There's no such thing as a constitutional republic. We have a supreme federal government, period. It does whatever it wants to do. But nullification in 1859, when the state of Wisconsin nullified a section of the Constitution, it was a section on fugitive slaves, and they enacted personal liberty laws. And they said, even though the Constitution and Wisconsin hadn't been part of the Union, but I think about 8 or 9 years when they did this. When they entered the Union, they knew that section of the Constitution was there, and they agreed to abide by it. Well, then they got to where they said, wait a minute, there's a moral compunction in us that we don't want to send a man or woman seeking freedom back to slavery. And that's a legitimate concern. I mean, I understand where they're coming from. So they said, what we're going to do, we're going to enact a personal liberty law and we'll nullify that section of the Constitution. Jefferson Davis made the point that he didn't want to wage war against these states for doing that because that was their right. That was their right to do that. So that's what nullification is. When you come to a point, now you don't remember, you were born much after this, but in 1962 and 1963, there was two very important Supreme Court decisions. They were combined. You might remember the name Madeleine O'Hara. You remember Madeleine O'Hara, the atheist? Well, she was the one that brought the initial suit to get rid of prayer and Bible reading out of schools. Well, the Supreme Court ordered said, nope, get rid of God out of the schools, prayer out of the schools, Bible out of the schools. Now at that point in time, the majority of the American states were church-going states. At that point in time, had we exercised our right of nullification, we could have brought everything to a stop right then. And then the government, the Supreme Federal Government, would be in a situation of either using troops against every Christian in America or accepting the concept of nullification. You know what Christians did? Nothing. Nothing. Yep. When that suit came, there was not a single friend of the court suit filed. It's all, depending on your Latin, either amicus or amicus brief submitted by Christian organizations in support of prayer and Bible reading in school. Not a one.
Wow.
Then after that, there was like 100 different offerings in the Congress about an amendment or something. It never materialized. Wow. So we allowed, that slouching towards Gomorrah. We've been at that point been slouching towards Gomorrah. And now today, that same court, not the same people, but that same federal Supreme Court says that a male sexual pervert has the right to follow your daughter into the little girl's room. And that's what's happened when good people do nothing. Mm-hmm. Christians are at fault for that. Absolutely. We have to answer for that. We allowed that to happen, that slouching towards Gomorrah. So I make that point. I've got another, I've got two other books coming out. One of them, Be Ye Separate, Bible Belt Revival or Revolution, in which I'm addressing this issue to Christians. Because, it's going to take more than Second Amendment rights people and Southern Heritage people and libertarians or people who believe in the 10th Amendment. It's going to take more than that to win this. We've got to get the vast majority of our people to understand the necessity of local self-government, of states' rights, of returning America to the republic of sovereign states that we once were. And you can't do that by just talking to each other. We've got to reach out to this others. That's why I've written this book. I want to try to get it out to Christians, to evangelicals. I've got it submitted to a publishing house. We'll see if I can find someone to publish it. But that's a way to reach out to Christians and say, look, and remember, the South is the Bible Belt. We can be the beginning of a revolution if we will use what God has given us, the good sense that God has given us. We can be the beginning. We can undo everything that Soros and company has done to America. We can undo it. But it's going to be more than just Southern Heritage people. It's going to be more than just Second Amendment people. It's got to be all of us. Yeah. And that's why I've got this book, and I'm going to try to get it out to among the Christian community. Let them understand it. You have a right to control the government. And if the federal government does something that's immoral, You have the same right that the people in Wisconsin have when their morality was questioned about fugitive slaves. We've got to reach out beyond just the small group that we've been talking to, which isn't a small group, but we've got to reach out to everyone in the South and eventually all across red state America.
Yeah, and there are the modern examples, like you were saying, sanctuary cities for immigration. You know, you had Denver and LA and San Francisco and all these places doing exactly that. They did it for years and years and years with marijuana. So it's, if you try to point people and say this has happened in modern times, because the whole local self-government thing, breaking out of the nation state mindset, is so difficult even for learned people. And I get it's the social engineering, it's all of our re-education. It is very, very hard for people to grasp. And I have these fights with Christians all the time, with priests and monks and all sorts of people, because they're calling for things that I may or may not agree with, but say I do agree with them, and but they're calling for some Goliath solution, some huge governmental solution, when I'm like, it's that's going to bring even more misery than is currently happening, but you know, it's not only going to not do what you want it to do, but you know, the easier way to do it in a way that makes everybody happier is just at the local level. And it is just really hard for people to grasp that. Just, it's an American thing that, you know, we are a tough nuts to crack, and we are nutty, and that's for sure. Because yeah, so I'm having a current debate with a monk, or sort of, and yeah, he you know, wants to be a good steward and all this stuff, and he's kind of, you know, kind of a tree hugger, but you know, he's a wonderful spiritual man. But he wants this, like, the government to solve this problem, not his state, not his county. I mean, he's basically calling the stuff he wants, it would be global government. So, you know, where do you even start with these people? And, you know, I'm the horrible, you know, disunifier, because I'm trying to say, hey, why don't you just push for local self-government and all this stuff you want? So anyway, I kind of went off on a tangent because, you know, people think in these terms that you and I think, that secession is tantamount to treason. We were discussing this in email, that it is just so hard for them to grasp that, you know, it's traitorous. And they just have to think on these huge scales of, you know, 330 million people or more all the time. And obviously that's not working. So how do you answer critics who charge you with being, you know, a traitor and promoting treason, when secession is the peaceful way? Peaceful divorce is better than the hostile marriage, right?
Well, yeah, absolutely. An amicable divorce, you know, divorce is never good, but an amicable divorce, especially if one party is being abused by the other party, is not only good, but it's necessary. And I think that's the situation we're in. But, you know, if secession is treason, tantamount to treason, then why was it taught at West Point? You know, and that's the thing. And Donald and I, back in 94, 93, we republished Rawls' View of the Constitution. And it's a textbook. So it's not, you know, it's not necessarily an easy read. It's a textbook, but we edited and annotated. It was used up to 1825 at West Point to teach the Constitution. Okay. William Rawls was an abolitionist. He was from Pennsylvania. Yet in his textbook, on the last chapter on the Union, he shows how a state could secede from the Union. He gave the procedure for doing it, which is the same procedure the Southern states followed. He also had a chapter in his 1825 edition on treason. Nowhere in that chapter does he talk about secession as being treason, because it wasn't. It was an accepted fact in life, and the federal government taught it. Now, after 1825, at West Point, this textbook, Rawls' View of the Constitution, was replaced by Kent's commentary. Chancellor Kent replaced it, but nowhere in his book did he counter anything that Rawls had said. And Rawls's textbook was kept at West Point as a reference book on the Constitution. And this is what, and Don and I quote Chancellor Ken. He talked about the Union. What does it mean? It says, on the concurrence and goodwill of the parts, the stability of the whole depends. So he's talking about the states. For the Union to remain stable, you've got to have goodwill on all parts. You've got to have concurrence, agreement, not bloody bayonets. Lincoln did not follow this. He used bloody bayonets. The Republican Party during Reconstruction used the threat and actual bloody bayonets to foist upon America a whole new governmental system, a supreme federal government, a tyranny that it is the only, who gets to decide the powers of the federal government? Oh, the Supreme Court? The federal Supreme Court. So you're asking the agent of the government that's denying your rights to decide whether or not that government has right to decide. It's absurd. It's ridiculous. The founding fathers did not create that government. Lincoln and the Republican Party created that government. That's why Don and I call it an illegitimate government. The current government, the one we live under today, is an illegitimate government. It's an unconstitutional government. It is anathema to what the founding fathers intended. You go back and read Thomas Jefferson and James Madison resolved, Virginia and Kentucky resolves in 1798. They make it very clear that what Wisconsin later did in 1859 was legitimate. Why? Because they were sovereign states and they had the right to decide. That's the original government. That's the original American government. We don't live under that government. We live under a Yankee Empire, and that Yankee Empire is ran by this evil neo-Marxist shadow government. I mean, it's composed of postmodernists in academia. It's the people in Silicon Valley who have monopolistic power thanks to the federal government. They're friends in the federal government. It's the digital media. It's the mainline media. It's the globalists. It's the political establishment. They are all there for the purpose of maintaining themselves in power and subjugating red state America, red county America to them.
Yeah, and that's what's so scary about the globalist aspect, obviously because it's huge, it's planetary, this planetary consciousness and the global citizen and all that kind of thing. So, when I see things like Brexit happening and, secessionist movements in Scotland and things like that, it gives me hope. But again, it's just so hard for people to break out of, like I said, the nation state mentality, but especially that is dangerous because of what the Yankee Empire does. We are at the head of the globo homogenization of planet Earth, that, to get rid of every culture, to make, kind of like the new Soviet man, but do it, through green energy and, anti-racism and all this stuff. I mean, it's the same old thing, but, you want to shake people because they think it's not, or they don't understand that every aspect, whether it's feminism or LGBT or climate change or whatever, they're all just pieces of that puzzle. And so if we can get it smaller now, that will bode well for all freedom-loving people. Well, what other practical suggestions? You mentioned guerrilla warfare in Dixie Rising. Just any other suggestions that people can do now, very easy, practical things we can do in our own lives. And then I'm just gonna, we'll wrap it up after that.
Well, first of all, we recommend guerrilla or irregular political warfare, not guerrilla warfare. Okay, we recommend a non-violent approach.
Right.
Just like so many, and in Dixie Rising, both the current edition and the new one coming out next, hopefully it'll be out in February.
Nice.
We point out that there were many nations and peoples who used non-violent resistance in order to gain their independence and their freedom. And those like Quebec that tried several times to secede, they were unsuccessful in their effort to secede from Canada, but that threat, and that's what you got to realize, the threat of secession was so terrifying to the federal government in Canada that they started making all kind of different concessions to Quebec, so Quebec could keep its sovereignty, could keep its language, could have its own. So just the very threat of secession sometimes is all that's required to maintain your liberty and your freedom. But what can we do immediately? Well, first of all, let's start looking at alternative news sources, alternative to Silicon Valley monopolists. Google, something better than Google. Go to Google. That's better than Facebook. It's better. That's as people, we need to move. The Black Lives Matter people. Sports people kneeling during the national anthem, and that really hit the viewership of professional sports. Mm-hmm. That is something that we can all do. But not just that, you can do it in every little aspect, especially when it comes to the digital media. They depend on being able to collect our information. If we move away to another platform that is conservative, they'll probably collect my information too, but if they're conservative, at least I know it's using it for a good purpose. Mm-hmm. But the liberals are not. The neo-Marxists in Silicon Valley are not. I think they, like 99%, donated to Biden in this last election. That sort of tells you. Not only that, but 100% of the bankers on Wall Street donated to Biden. I mean, it sort of tells you where the shadow government is and where they're going, and they're not going to a good place for us. So there's a lot of things we can do, but the most important thing, and I keep pointing this out. Donald and I started in 1991 warning Southerners that if we don't take strong political action, the very little that we subsist on now will be taken from us. Well, 2020 has certainly proved that we were right. But unfortunately, the leadership of Southern movements and political movements, they didn't want to do anything. They want to maintain the status quo. Well, as you see in Dixie Rising and other books that we've done, I don't want to maintain the status quo. I want to destroy the status quo. Mm-hmm. I want to replace the supreme federal government with a constitutionally limited republic of sovereign states. And we can do that. We can do that through this constitutional amendment. So we need to get organized, and you can expect once Biden takes over, horrible things are going to start happening. It's going to be like Obama on steroids. And you can expect to see the Tea Party type movements coming back up again. But again, if you don't have a strategic plan, and if you don't know how to put that plan into action, if you don't have a way to bring about eventual victory, then you won't amount to anything. Conservatives have spent 150 years conserving what? What have we conserved? We've lost everything. We haven't conserved anything. So, I'm glad that people in the Tennessee legislature are looking around for help. But until they admit, every politician that does not admit that the current system is a fraudulent system, not just the election, the whole system, it's a fraudulent system, it is not a legitimate government. It is a government based on bloody bayonets. Until they admit that and then start the process necessary to reclaim America's original constitutionally limited republic of sovereign state. Until that happens, we're going to keep doing the same things we've always done, and we're going to end up in the same sad situation. And America is slouching. It's not slouching towards Gomorrah. It is in a mad, riotous rush to Sodom and Gomorrah. Mm-hmm. And that's not going to be good for our children, our grandchildren.
Yeah, and when you say the strategic plan, and it has to be very exact and precise, because I think a lot of times with anything that's not leftist, it's big tent, and people start compromising on this and that, and people are making these moral platitudes. We're not this and that, and we apologize for these things, and we're so sorry about that, and we love bipartisanship. you know those days need to be history right there, because
Absolutely.
you have one chink in the armor and subversives are just in there running around, whether or not they even know they're subversives. And that's exactly what happened to the Tea Party.
Yep.
So I applaud you, and will do anything I can do to help this thing become a reality, because I think it sounds like pragmatic and doable, and it's not pie in the sky at all. So I'm very excited about it. Thank you for letting us know. Before we go, you had mentioned a couple of your books that you're working on. Do you want to plug those again and tell us a little bit about your brother's book, Confederate Mythbuster?
Yeah, Confederate Mythbuster. My wife, my I get it right, man. My twin brother, did that book, and it's basically when we used to get questions. How do you answer when someone on a radio interview hits you with this? How do you answer it? So he put together these questions and the answers to it, and it's a good read. It's got a lot of good information. And as I read it, I said, yeah, I said that. I told you that. It's funny because a lot of times we don't know who said, like, do you remember that, or do I remember that, or I don't. It sort of comes together.
Right.
I have, like I said, a book that should be out hopefully this spring. Be ye separate. Again, it's pointed towards the Christian community to realize that this slouching towards Gomorrah cannot end well for churches. I mean, it's going to come to the point where churches that don't support gay marriage and LBGQ, A, B, C, D, E, whatever, if they don't support that, then they're going to lose their tax exempt status. And that's where it's going. So if we don't do something as Christians, we're going to lose more than just prayer in school. So that's what that book, and it should be out this fall. I mean,
what's it called?
Spring.
What's
It's
it called?
Be Ye Separate.
Okay, nice.
Be Ye Separate.
I would love to have you back on after that comes out. That sounds great, because as a Christian, I can complain about leftists all day long, but I hold Christians to a much higher standard, and I think they need a good talking to. So I can't wait to read it.
The other book that I've got coming out is a very short book. I think it's going to be like 40 or 50 pages, more like a booklet, and I plan on having it on my website as a free PDF download. But the title of that is Red State, Red County Revolution, Creating a Nation of Our Own. And so I think it's very topical, and I think regardless of how this election finally settles out, and I'm afraid it's not going to settle out in favor of Trump. I hope it does, but I don't think it will, because the people that's in charge of doing the assessment are not on our side. It's sort of sad, but it's a time when the red states and the blue states, the red counties and blue counties, are going to have to decide: can we come together in a system of government where you do your thing in your state, I'll do my thing in my state. I won't bother you, you don't bother me, and as a nation we can still be 50 United States of America. But if the blue states won't do that, if they insist upon using the power of the federal government to force their beliefs on us, then there's only one choice for people who love liberty. Mm-hmm. And remember what Patrick Henry said: the first thing I have at heart is American liberty. The second is American union. So Patrick Henry said it best: liberty trumps government. And if the blue states refuse to allow us to live in a manner that we think is morally right, then we have to go our own way.
Yes. And, I see that picture of Jefferson Davis behind you, and he wasn't an ardent secessionist, coming out of the womb either, but it's like, Yes, when you are in the relationship that your spouse is beating you over and over and over, it's time to leave that relationship.
That's
So,
right.
well, James Ronald Kennedy, Ron Kennedy, thank you so much, of the Kennedy twins fame and just unreconstructed stalwart. And I appreciate you so much for coming on the show. And I would love to have you back on when some of your other books come out. And I just appreciate all the guidance and education that you've given to me that I'm passing on to my children. And I just can't thank you enough for being such a hero to us. Thank you.
But thank you very much for having me. And anybody that wants to look at our books, they can go to our website. If it's all right with you, I'll mention that. It's,
yes, please.
of course, www is kennedytwins.com. That should be hard to remember. kennedytwins.com. You've got pictures of all our books that are currently available. Click on it and you can find out more how to get them, etc.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. And yes, we'll have to talk off the air after this, so you can let me know how to get involved in all this revolutionary activity. It sounds just up my alley. All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Goodbye.